Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm doing this while it's on my mind, even though it's... I'll explain. I've selected the new project plants for next year, and firstly, this set of project plants started in December, basically middle of winter, and went on until now, middle of winter. To give a break from the Project Orchids, I'm starting the next set in March. So they're going to start at the beginning of the growing season rather than in the middle of winter, which sounds like quite a good idea to me. I think this current set was just started because that's when the idea came up, rather than any logic that went into it. So I'm going to start the next set in March, which will be the beginning of the growing season, so that we can see them through the growing season and through the winter and out the other end to the following March. I think that might work a little bit better. Right, let's go over the plants and why. What and why, basically. So starting at the top, firstly, there's going to be 4 parts, the same as there was with this series, but they're going to be a bit more constrained this time. The first part of this series and subsequent updates contained 11 plants, and it's too much. I can't do it. It's just too much work. So each part this time is only going to have 6 or 7 plants in it, which is manageable. I can do that. Having just done most of the final update for part 3 and realised that 6 plants is just about right. And I don't get bored before I've finished it. Anyway, I thought I'd go down through my notes. It's the easiest way. I've already marked them. They're marked in green. The current project plants, as we go down the list, you'll see are marked in purple. So that's for me to differentiate. So I thought we ought to have a Brassia this time. We didn't have one last time, and I would love to have had the species, the Verrucosa, but it's too big. Filming it would just be too difficult, and if and when it does decide to bloom on the new growths, the spikes are 2 or 3 foot long. I can't get it in. So I've gone for the Santa Barbara, which was the other one I got at Burnham's at their 70th anniversary, so I haven't had it long. Next year will be its first growing season with me, which is part of the reason I've selected it. So that will go in part 1, which is basically the Oncidium Types. Right, coming down here, I've decided to go for a compact Cattleya. So I've gone for the little lemon drops crossed with Cattleytonia Why Not. If and when it blooms, the blooms are gorgeous, and it's a nice compact plant, so it's easy to film in a clay pot. So that's the logic for deciding on that one. Small compact plant that I can film easily, and with nice blooms, which we should see sometime during the filming next year. So that would be nice to see the spikes, you know, advancing and coming into bloom as the season progresses. Fingers crossed and all that. That will go in part 3, which is the Cattleya Types. Right, coming down here, you'll notice there's some other stuff on here that still hasn't been cleared out, stuff to dump that hasn't actually been dumped yet. In the other Cattleyas, I've decided to stick Iwanagara apple blossom in, on the grounds that I know what's going to happen to that during next year. It's going to be another one where I try cutting the rhizome. So that'll make a little bit of added interest into that particular plant. Again, that'll go in part 3, the Cattleya Types. The Lealia purpurata variety atropurpurea is carrying on. It's had a project. It was one of the project plants for this year. It's going on next year. On the grounds it will not bloom, and maybe next year is the one. You never know. And the other Lealia that's going in is the one I got at the Welsh Orchid Society. So it's a pretty new plant, and it's unusual in as much as it's a Lealia species, and it's crossed with a Brautonia. And its name is probably Joyce Hylton. I can't absolutely confirm that, but highly likely. And I thought that was bought in bloom, and once it had finished blooming it was mounted, and it's sitting there static at this point in time. So we'll pick it up in March and see what's happening to it and follow it through the year. That should be interesting. Now, in the last lot of project plants we didn't have a coelogeny, so I've decided to put my cristata in this time. Didn't bloom last spring. It may bloom this spring, so we might pick that one up in March while it's actually in bloom. That will go in part 4, which is the cooler, shadier types. So I'm maintaining the concept of each part. So that will go in there. So we'll have a coelogeny this time. As far as the Dendrobiums are concerned, I've tried to pick one from each section, relatively speaking. I mean, this is my list of Toilumnia types. Now, we had Alexandriae last time. Well, this time we're going to have rhodostictum, which is probably my most favourite, Alexandriae being up in the favourites. But rhodostictum had a serious problem during this growing season, but let's try and follow through its rescue. I don't want all good plants in here, I want some that are struggling to see if we can get them going. So that's why I've picked rhodostictum, currently mounted and sitting there doing nothing. Right, to pick up a winter rester, during this set we had a phyllum, and I've chosen lindleyi for the next set simply because it's quite a new plant and it's a non-bloomer so far. It's a relatively small plant, so let's see what we can do with that next year. That'll be interesting. That goes in the Dendrobiums part 2, dedicated section. And to represent the phalaenopsis types, which we didn't have in the last set, I've chosen a no ID hybrid, and it's the white one. Strictly speaking, it's Hannah's plant, but her cats kept eating it, so it became my plant with chewed leaves. So we'll see how we get on with that one. I'm doing better with my phalaenopsis types than I used to. Once upon a time, they did not do well for me. To represent the nobilies, we had Prima Donna in this set, and this time we're going to have yet again another new plant, yeah, and it's Sweet Pinky Momoko, and this is the one I got at Burnham's as a gilt buy. In other words, I'd gone to their did I get it at the 70th? No, I got it. We took a coach trip of the Orchid Society to Burnham's, and as we were thinking about getting back on the coach, Hannah said, "You really ought to buy something. It's rude not to." So I did, and I bought that. So relatively new plant, bought in the middle of last year. Actually, it would have been about April, come to think of it. It was in bloom at the time, so it's a non-rebloomer, but it has bloomed. So we'll see what we can do with that one. Other types, chryseum. Now, in its original state, when it came out of the big box, there's no way I'd have included that. But having hacked off the long old canes, this is now, although a large plant and quite difficult to film, it's an interesting one now because it hasn't bloomed, but it's now in a state where it might. Yeah, the previous year's growths during this winter are currently dropping their leaves. The new growths, some of which are still growing, have pushed on really well. I've got a root system on it, and the previous season's growths might bloom. So I thought we'd include that, and that was a request, that one as well. So several reasons for that one being included. And also another request, could I include my manky Victoria Regina, sorry. So okay, yes, I'll include it. I don't know whether we're going to see much going on with it, but like I said, I don't want all good plants. I want some that are in a sorry state to see if we can get them going. Right, we didn't have an Encyclia or, well, we did have one Epidendrum last time, but the Encyclia cordigera was a plant I nearly lost, and I've sort of rescued it, so it's not doing bad now. So I thought we'd have a look at that one and watch that one through the year. So that's Encyclia cordigera. The Epidendrums, as you can see with the list of to go, and this one in red is on borrowed time, that might actually join the to dump crew, not sure yet. But we've got a brand new plant that I actually got in the raffle at the Christmas do, literally last weekend. So I thought, as it's a brand new plant, unknown, I don't know much about it, and it was mounted, so let's see if we can follow that one through. That'll be interesting. An Epidendrum species, lanipes, pays, booze, whatever you want, one of those. Choose yourselves. Now, coming into the cooler, shadier type, I obviously want a Masdevallia and a Dracula. So I thought I'd choose Masdevallia ignea as a non-bloomer, but a good plant. Seems to grow well for me, it just won't bloom. And the Dracula Bella, which we've had trouble with through this growing season on the grounds that it just keeps pushing up spikes and aborting them. So although it was included in the project plants for this set, it's going in the next set as well. Let's see if we can work out why those buds keep blasting and perhaps actually get it to bloom. So that'll go in that set. Right, this Miltonia Queen Ann has been selected because it's a problem. It might even have a virus, as yet undetermined. But it's got a problem with it, and as I said, I don't want all good plants, so I've included that. But part way through next year it might end up getting dumped, depending on circumstances. But I thought we'd start out by including it. That goes in the Oncidium Alliance type, not in the cooler, shadier one. Sorry. However, we've got to have at least one Miltoniopsis in the cooler, shadier types, and this time I've gone for one of the ones that came from the Eric Young Foundation that was bought at our 60th anniversary show back in March. So relatively new. It's a mature plant, but when it was repotted, it had a lousy root system and a serious possibility of fusarium. Looking at some of the older bulbs that were cut off. So we'll see what we can do with that one. And I've also chosen, I'd love to have chosen the one that's red there. I got two Miltoniopsis species from Zana in a bit of a sorry state. Now the Rosellii may not make it, and it seems a bit silly to include a plant that might not even be there in March. It's struggling really badly. However, the other species, the phalaenopsis, is hanging in there. So far so good. It's one of those. So those two will go in the cooler, shadier section. And then most of the rest of the Oncidium section, I've chosen Tahitian Dancer, currently in bloom. It won't be when we get to March, obviously, when we start the series. But it'll be an interesting time to pick the plant up, having recently finished blooming. Are the new growths coming yet? That sort of thing. And I've also included the Banfieldara Gilded Tower Mystic Maze, because I've had this for years and it hasn't bloomed since I got it, and it just doesn't seem to want to take off for me. So we'll include that one as a struggling plant. So both of these to go in part one. And I've also included the chrysomorphum. That was the other plant that came from Zana. So an Oncidium species that was potted up with no roots, zero, zilch, not a light. And that's where it currently sits. Now it might have actually started to grow by the time we get to March, but it'll be interesting to follow that one through. So that goes in part one, the Oncidium lot. And by request, and also I had it in mind anyway, my new Psychopsis is going in with the Oncidium types, as it is. It's actually called Butterfly. It's a hybrid between, so it's a primary cross between Papilio and Sanderier. So we'll include that one, as I said, by request. Right, what else we got? Paphiopedilums, that will go in the cooler, shadier lot, although strictly speaking this might not be a cooler grower. But this is a miniature, It does actually belong to Hannah, but I've chosen a Paphiopedilum Delenatii vinicolor. Non-bloomer, arrived with me from Hannah with 0 roots and took 2 years before it even grew one. So it's not in a good state, but it has grown some new leaves. So that'll be interesting to include. And that's probably it, but no, not quite. And although I included the Toilumnia species in the last set, I've decided to go for a hybrid for the Toilumnias. And in this series they got tagged on the end of the Cattleya types. Not quite sure how that happened, but it did. Probably because part 1, the Oncidium types, was too big, which it now isn't. So Toilumnia Peach has been selected, and it will be in part 1 with the Oncidium alliance, where it should be, quite honestly. And that is probably it. I'm still wondering whether... So we've got part 1, the Oncidium alliance, part 2, Dendrobiums, part 3, Cattleya alliance, and part 4, cooler, shadier types. And as I've cut down the number of plants, I don't know what you think about having a part 5. Is 5 too many? Which is oddities, which could include something like a Sarcochilus. Yeah? Some oddities. But I think 4 parts. Bear in mind they are, well, they're not bang up against each other, but they are relatively close together. I think 4's enough. So for next year, starting around March, that's the list. That's what's going in and why. A lot of those are my choices, but I have included some requests, and part of the reason for doing this video is to stop the requests coming in. The list is now closed, shall we say, and those are they, and we'll see how we go with those. I know it's a long time away, March, but time seems to fly, so it'll come round, you know. So we will start the new project series in March, and then we'll do the same thing again. We'll do updates every 3 months until we get to the final ones the following March in whatever that will be, 2021. Oh, it's frightening, isn't it? Yes. Well, if we start in March 2020, we're going to end in March 2021. That is frightening. That's just, especially as I'm getting older by the day. Well, we all are. But my days seem to be going quicker and quicker nowadays. So that's the list of the new ones. And we are slowly saying bye-bye to the final ones that are coming to a close now. I've loaded part 1 and part 2. Part 3 is partly done, and part 4's not started. But I am hoping to get part 3 and 4 done before Christmas. So thanks for dropping by, and I hope you like the new list. What I will do is actually put that list in the description of this video. Then there's a reference point to go back to, should anybody need it, including me. See you next time. Bye for now.